The Tarrant County Master Gardener Association has partnered with the Tarrant Regional Water District to encourage water conservation. TRWD maintains 4 area lakes and pipelines needed to provide surface water to local water treatment plants so they can clean that water to meet drinking standards for our communities. They also work with many cities in Tarrant County, such as Fort Worth, Arlington, Mansfield, and many others, to provide water conservation programs to the community. Conservation is an important water supply strategy to help meet the needs of our growing population. There are currently 2.3 million people living in Tarrant County, and this is expected to double over the next 50 years. At SaveTarrantWater.com, you can sign up for free weekly watering advice custom to your location. If you're a resident of Tarrant County, you can sign up for a free sprinkler's checkup where a licensed irrigator comes to your home, provides a comprehensive evaluation of your system with recommendations to reduce water waste. There's also an event calendar where you can find information about future classes and workshops. So be sure and check out SaveTarrantWater.com to sign up for their free services.
Okay. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us. I noticed a lot of people from Collin County. Welcome. We will talk today about veggie gardening. So let's get started. Did your veggie garden last year look like the one on the left or the one on the right? The one on the left is, those plants aren't too happy. They might be showing some nitrogen deficiency. Maybe the soil is too alkaline. I'm going to discuss all those issues with you. The photo on the right, that plant is getting everything that it needs. It's happy. So what happens there? It's going to give you more fruit, more tomatoes, more peppers, whatever you're growing. But you have to give the plants what they need. You have to make their roots happy and give them the nutrition that they need. As you guys know, especially the master gardeners, successful gardening equals good soil. That is your foundation. You have to start with really good soil. And of course, sunlight, water, and hopefully weather cooperates with you. Soil map of Texas. So take a look at this. Even in Dallas, Fort Worth here, look how your neighbor or your aunt can have much different soil than what you have in your backyard. And look at this graphic. Healthy soil on the left, look at the roots. Look at the unhealthy soil on the right. This goes for your vegetable plants too, not just for trees or shrubs, your flowers. If you provide healthy soil, it's not compacted, it's getting the water that it needs, nutrients, then you will have that output. In Tarrant County area, take a look at that soil on the left. We primarily have clay soil. It's a shame we have to work with this, but we can amend and we can make it better. We can make our roots and plants happy. If you're lucky, you're going to have the soil on the right-hand side. It's a mix of sand, silt, and clay, sandy loam soil. Take a look at this graphic. Compare sand to clay. Okay, sand, as you know, they're bigger pieces and they're not porous. So when you water sandy soil, the water just kind of trickles away from it. It doesn't absorb anything. Clay, on the other hand, are kind of like dusty, small particles. So no wonder when water's added, it becomes compacted easily. There's not a lot of oxygen. So roots aren't too happy in that compacted clay. So what we have to do is amend. By the way, later on in this presentation, I'm going to give you resources so you can find a shopping list of plants that do really well in our area. So you can print that out, take it shopping with you. And also we're going to go through some fertilizer, understanding that, our soil test, and some issues with your veggies. Amendments. Let's read this. Material that is added to improve the soil's physical properties, such as water retention, permeability, drainage, and aeration. The goal, you guys, is to make your roots happy. That's how you get a successful garden. Here are some soil amendment examples. So remember, I told you that clay, water just kind of trickles away from it. It doesn't have the ability to hold moisture. Clay, on the other hand, it holds a lot of nutrients and it doesn't have good drainage. So they're kind of opposite of the spectrum. But if you add some of these amendments, look at compost. Decomposed organic matter. It improves aeration, moisture retention, and enriches the soil. I am a huge compost proponent. Anytime my students tell me there might be an issue, first thing I tell them, well, of course, go get a soil test. Second thing is, are you using compost? Did you amend your soil? So take a look at these. Lime, most of us won't need that here because that's going to reduce acidity. Most plants want a little bit of acidity. You know, I'm saying most, not all, but most. Sulfur, take a look at that. It lowers soil pH, increasing acidity. I promise you I will go over this later so you will understand what all of this means. So how do you get started? If you have that really bad clay or sandy soil, how do you remedy that situation? Compost, like I said, 2 to 3 inches on top. So basically put a blanket of compost on top of your soil and work it in. 6 to 8 inches is fine. If you're starting a brand new garden, you can go as deep as 10 to 12 inches. It aerates and loosens soil, and it adds nutrients and organic matter. Then we have expanded shale. I don't know if a lot of you have used this yet. Wonderful material, same thing. Add about 3 inches on top, work it into your soil. It contains a lot of porous spaces, a lot of air spaces. So it allows clay soil to become a little more permeable, you know, adds a little oxygen because roots, after all, they also need oxygen, not just water. Loosens tight clay soils, aerates, like I said. A Texas product. Dr. Steve George of Texas A&M University did some studies on amending soil. You can actually look this up if you want to and do more research on it. But he said after some years of research that, you know, even though he loves compost like me, he said that he found the results of expanded shale were a little better. So he says, add expanded shale and compost, work it into your soil, into your soil. The best of both worlds, you'll get the nutrients, the minerals, aeration, all of it. So that is what I recommend also. Soil testing. All of the master gardeners know this, broken record. Go get your soil tested. When you go to the doctor and tell your doctor that you're not feeling well, let's say that you're, I don't know, vomiting, you're a little yellow, does your doctor just prescribe you a medication? No, you have to go get a blood test. You need to, and maybe some x-rays to find out what's wrong with you. So I always compare that to a blood test. A soil test is for your soil. You need to find out what is going on, what's too high, what's too low, what do you need to add to amend, what grows well in your yard. You won't know until you get this done. I do not get paid for this. If you get your soil tested, it is now it's about $12 to get it done. Just do the basic one and you'll have a good baseline on how to remedy your problematic soil. So here's my soil test results. We will visit this again later on, but I wanted you to take a look. See right here where it says nitrate, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. That's NPK, okay? We will come back to this, I promise. Let's talk about NPK fertilizers, okay? N is nitrogen, P is phosphorus, K is potassium. That one's kind of tricky because it's a K instead of a P. These are all synthetic, okay? A lot of people get confused. What's the difference between synthetic and organic? Well, of course, organic is more, you know, natural products, not man-made. Let's look at this example on the top left, the all-purpose that says 10, 10, 10. What that means is the numbers represent a percentage of volume by weight. So let's say that's a 50-pound bag. That means this product has 10% of 50 pounds. So that's going to be 5 pounds of nitrogen, 5 pounds of phosphorus, 5 pounds of potassium. Does that make sense? Now, this product here, the all-purpose nitrogen, that only has nitrogen in it. So you need to know what you're buying. You can't just go to the store and let me just throw this on my plant, because you can end up with some issues. You can end up with tomato plants that don't produce fruit because you gave it too much nitrogen. They basically turn into tomato trees, no fruit at all. So you need to know what to apply to get the best results. Also, I just told you about synthetic. This numbering and labeling system is required by law. Okay, so with organic fertilizers, it's different because you're going to normally see lower numbers too. So it doesn't mean you're just, buying filler or water. By the way, on that 10-10-10, remember we said 5 pounds of nitrogen, 5 pounds of phosphorus, 5 pounds of potassium. So that's 15 pounds out of 50. So what's the rest of it? Filler. Not necessarily junk or anything, but maybe it's something to keep the granules from sticking together. Maybe it's more product to allow the plants to better absorb those nutrients. So they were all kind of crafted, by humans, by scientists to work for your plants. So that's the synthetic side. Organic, it's really not a fair rating system for organic because organics are going to be like seaweed fertilizer, fish fertilizer. So it's usually going to be ground up fish, ground up seaweed. So it's not a fair comparison. These synthetic fertilizers, they basically dumped 5 pounds of nitrogen in, 5 pounds of phosphorus, whereas organic, it's a totally different animal. NPK, I like this graphic because it makes it easy to remember. So nitrogen, think up. Nitrogen helps green plants, okay? That's why you end up putting it on lawns, because you want your lawn to green up. Phosphorus, think down into the roots and also blooms. Potassium, or K, is going to be all around health. Okay, now we're back to my test. Look at where it says my soil's pH is 7.8. On the report, you'll see it right here, pH 7.8. So that means I am moderately alkaline. Unfortunately, most plants do not like alkaline soil. Some of our natives do very well here in a neutral or slightly alkaline environment, but some plants, you dig a hole, you put that plant in and it suffers. It gets chlorosis, nitrogen deficiency, just the vascular system, it gets all clogged up. It can't function. It can't conduct photosynthesis. Things go wrong, kind of like your body. If you had too much calcium in your body or you had something going wrong, you're going to start feeling bad. You're going to start having symptoms. So plants are a lot like us, really. I know that sounds funny, but we are a lot like plants in needing nutrition, needing the sunlight, needing water. So think about that when you plant your plants. Don't just plant them and forget about it. So back to this report. See this nitrogen here? This yellow highlighted mark and this dotted line is where I should be. But it shows here I'm a little deficient in nitrogen. And that's quite normal. Nitrogen is depleted quite quickly. Phosphorus, I'm a little short. But look at potassium. I have too much. So why on earth would I go out and buy, let's say, a balanced fertilizer? Okay, like a 15-15-15. Why would I apply that when I don't need any potassium? See why you need this? I had a student, or have a student, at one of my TCC campuses, and she said she had this test done, and she had no luck at all last year with her veggie garden. So I said, go get this soil test done. When she got it back, Texas A&M told her, do not apply potassium for 5 years. That's how much potassium she had. It was off the charts, okay? So I don't know what happened before she took over this house or this property, but something was wrong. Maybe the former owner was applying the wrong thing. We don't know, but now she knows I need to stop throwing a regular balanced fertilizer in my veggie bed. That's not what it needs. So now she knows to go specifically and just get the nitrogen or the potassium. She knows to go get specifically what she needs. And Texas A&M will tell you that. They'll tell you all the weights and the amounts to apply. All right, so this class is not organic or synthetic or anything like that. I'm just telling you what I personally like to do. Look at the difference. Organic fertilizers feed the soil. I'm a big proponent of nurturing and feeding your soil because the microorganisms, the microbiome, all that kind of takes care of everything. It has a relationship with your roots, you know, how it can uptake more nutrients and be more efficient. Whereas synthetic fertilizers are going to go directly to feeding the plant. So I like to nurture my soil. I like to, in essence, grow soil. In my 30 plus years of gardening experience and playing with both synthetic and organic, I have seen the results in organic gardening. So it's up to you. You can go either way, but that's what I personally like to choose, the organic. And we will talk about some of those products. These organic fertilizers, I'm not pushing any of these on you. I'm just showing you all the different fertilizers that you can go and buy on Amazon, Home Depot, Callaway's, your favorite store. Note the low NPK numbers on this fish fertilizer, 511, okay? But remember, that labeling system is really not fair for organic products because that is smashed up, emulsified fish, okay? The manufacturer didn't dump in 20% nitrogen, 20% phosphorus. It's a different animal. I like to use compost. Honestly, I'm not a huge user of fertilizer. I like to use compost. That works in so many ways, you know, aeration. It neutralizes soil. It actually brings it down from being so alkaline. It adds organic matter. Fish fertilizer is one of my favorites for my veggie garden, and seaweed fertilizer. If you have a dog, you may not want to use the fish fertilizer because they like to dig. It stinks really bad. Seaweed fertilizer doesn't have as much of an odor, and I have personally seen pretty much the same results. So I use both, but because of my dogs, I have mainly been using the seaweed fertilizer. Soil fertility determines expected yield. This is so important, guys. There's a reason why you don't go outside and dig a hole and plant your veggie garden. You need to amend your soil, right? Remember I told you I don't really fertilize a lot. I just use compost. But when it comes to my veggie garden, I do add fertilizer. Like I said, I like to use the fish or the seaweed fertilizer. The reason is you've got these veggie plants, okay? They don't live more than a year. They're basically, in essence, if you will, annuals. You want to force those plants to give you the biggest yield. Do you want just 2 cucumbers on your vine this year? No. You want enough to make pickles. Do you want 6 tomatoes? No. You want enough to share with neighbors to make salsa, marinara. So if you want the best bang for your buck, you need to nurture your soil. It needs to be fertile. So I recommend those 2 fertilizers. You can use synthetic if you wish, but you do need to give your plants what it needs so that it has the energy to produce more flowers and more fruit for you. A lot of people ignore this. This is really important. When pH is wrong, that's when your plants, you know, of course, sun is also a variable, water, good soil, but pH is really important too. And I'll show you why, some real examples of what different plants need and what they like. So take a look at this. The 7 is neutral, okay? And then when you've got the lower numbers, that's acidic, and then all the way up to alkaline. Most plants like it in this range right here, 6-ish, up to 7. They don't really like it up here. And if it's too alkaline, they can actually die. Or on the opposite end, too acidic. Take a look at this graphic. It gives you a better understanding of the pH chart. So pure water is 7, Okay. Remember I told you my pH is 7.8. So mine's right in here in this range. It's alkaline. Okay. Remember that 7.8, my soil. Soil pH and plant examples. Azaleas. A lot of people like azaleas, but as you know, they're not native. And they're fine. If you want to plant them, that's fine. I don't choose to plant plants that are high maintenance like azaleas because they're more thirsty. You have to apply fertilizer on them to make them happy and to bloom more. And if you really want good results, you need to buy a fertilizer that is acidifying, because look, they like soil that's 5 to 5.5. They like acidic soil. Remember, my soil is 7.8. So this plant would struggle if I dug a hole and planted it. It would not be happy. It might end up getting nitrogen deficiencies because the roots can't pull nitrogen from the soil effectively because the pH is all wonky and wrong. Blueberries love super acidic soil, 4.3 to 5.5. A friend of mine that lives about a mile away from me, he planted some blueberries. And the following year, he told me, you know, I tried blueberries. They just didn't work for me. I just had, you know, the vine, the leaves didn't look very healthy, and I hardly had any fruit. And I said, did you do a soil test? He's new to gardening. So we talked about it, got him a soil test. We added some sulfur, some ammonium sulfate to his soil. You have to be careful with that though, because you can have really big swings in pH if you're not careful. Always follow the back label on how much to apply. But yeah, blueberries, strawberries also like acidic soil. Who has had good experience planting strawberries in their backyard here? Probably no one, unless you amended like crazy, put some acidifier in the soil or used acidifying fertilizer. That could work. Back to the azaleas. If you go to the store, you can find fertilizers for azaleas. It'll say something like for camellias, azaleas, and rhododendrons. Okay, all of those plants like acidic soil, acidic fertilizer, and acidic soil. So the fertilizer is going to contain some type of sulfur or some ingredient to acidify. Most vegetables and ornamentals do best in slightly acidic soil, 6 to 6.8. So we're getting a little closer to my soil pH, right? A little closer. Clematises, they are not, most are not native to here, but we're getting even closer, 6 to 7. Clematises do so well in my yard. I don't even have to fertilize. I really just sprinkle a little bit of compost on them. They do great and they bloom their heart out because I'm giving it what it needs. It's almost there with the pH. Salvias, I planted so many Salvia greggii in my yard. It's a native, and look, they accept 6.1 to 7.8. My pH is 7.8, so what do you know? They love my yard. So I don't have to amend, I don't have to do a lot to them. I initially did put some compost in there when I planted, but year to year, they just bloom their heart out without any effort from me. So this is why it's so important to plant natives that are meant to be in your soil. Try to stay away from the tropical plants and the ones that need more fertilizer, need more acidifier and all that. But this isn't about that, it's about vegetables. So let's stick to it. So what happens when a plant or tree doesn't have proper soil pH? I mentioned this earlier. Things go a little haywire. The plant cannot conduct its functions correctly. So you'll end up seeing nitrogen deficiencies, chlorosis, plant problems, plant stress, not enough fruit production. So I hope you understand now why soil pH is so important to know. I found this on hobbyfarms.com. It says, choose the right edibles for your soil to produce an abundant bounty. You can give your fruits and veggies all the TLC you have to offer, but put them in the wrong soil and you'll have plants that are less than desirable. So true. So take a look at this. On this side, These veggies and fruits prefer acidic soil. On the right, these prefer alkaline soil. So if I didn't want to put too much effort into, let's say, an in-ground vegetable garden in my yard, maybe I just wanted to do some compost and not do much else. All of these here will do well in my yard because it's close to that 7.8. They like a pH of 7 or above. Whereas these on the left are going to struggle a little bit unless I give them what they need. You cannot change your yard's pH, but you can help amend with compost. This is why choosing native plants and recommended varieties. Okay, what I'm talking about is recommended varieties of vegetables. As we move along, I will show you where to go online to get a shopping list so you can take it to your favorite veggie store. Maybe you can grow your own from seeds. That's fun too. But you'll know which ones will do best in our soil. Location, location, location. We know that vegetables, most of them need 8 hours of sun or more. Some say 6. Are there structures and trees nearby? If it's sunny one part of the day, but you've got a huge tree and then it's shaded for the rest of the day, may not be an ideal situation. Is it close to a water source? Okay, we have some drought conditions here. You might need to apply a little bit of water, or you might need a rain barrel. Do you want in-ground, container, or raised? You've got to go get your soil tested. You just won't know what your garden needs until you get that baseline. Look at this picture here on the left. What is wrong with that picture? I'll tell you. How are you going to reach those veggies in the middle? You're going to trample all over that garden. It's pretty, but not realistic. In-ground veggie gardens, let's talk about this first. You're going to need some type of barrier around it to hopefully keep some of the grass out of it. Remove grass and weeds, till down 12 inches, break up that hard clay soil. As you know, Bermuda grass, I call it the devil. It likes to sneak its way into flower beds, vegetable beds. So you may want to use some weed barrier, cardboard. I like to teach people about sheet mulching and lasagna gardening. So basically you suffocate your current lawn. You let it, what I call simmer. So you put your cardboard down, then you put a lot of mulch on top, about 3 inches, and you let it sit there. Usually 1 year is good. So you do have to be patient. So maybe you can create a flower bed or vegetable bed this year, plant it next year, future planning. But that is the best way I have found to eradicate my Bermuda. And it composts at the same time because the cardboard and the grass, that's carbon and nitrogen, those two get together with moisture and oxygen and become compost. So you're also amending at the same time by really doing nothing, just letting it sit there. Remove as many rocks as you can. Here in Haslett, every shovelful, I pick out a huge rock. Add amendments as needed. This is your in-ground. But like I said, I'm a broken record. Go get a soil test first so you know what your baseline is and what you need to apply. Above ground or raised bed gardens. Here are 2 really good examples. They're pretty fancy and probably quite pricey. It's whatever you like. You can get some recycled wood, repurpose it. You can buy a lot of kits these days that are made out of aluminum. Above ground veggie gardens, the benefits. You can put good soil in there from the get-go. You can go out and buy it. You can go to places like WizQ Stone, Living Earth. A really popular one for master gardeners these days is Silver Creek in Fort Worth. Any of those will give you good soil. You can buy it, by the bulk in your truck, have it delivered. Filling it with that good soil keeps out more weeds because you're not dealing with your native soil with weed seeds and grass roots. It's just a little easier. Easier on the back, but it depends on how tall it is. It's contained and clean. Disadvantages. It can be very expensive. So make sure you do your measurements, do some math, go to the home improvement store, find out how much that wood is, or look on eBay or Wayfair or Amazon. Find out how much that aluminum raised bed kit is. Find out all those, write it down before you start doing this, because let's admit, we can just go to the grocery store and buy a head of lettuce and life is easy, right? But there's something intrinsic about it, something that brings you satisfaction to grow your own veggies at home. You'll have limited space because you can only plant in those areas unless you make another veggie bed. It will dry out a little faster than in-ground because it is raised. It's more exposed to the heat. It requires some time to settle. So if you go and get bulk and you fill it up, bags too, you need to mound it a little higher than you think, because after a couple of rains or irrigation, it will settle like crazy because all the little air spaces in between your soil. So do mound it somewhat, be reasonable. And then after about a month or so, you'll see that it has sunk quite a bit. Container gardening. A lot of people, I teach the senior education program. Some of them are in condos. They don't have huge yards, so they want to garden in pots. That is perfectly fine. You may want to get varieties of vegetables that say container friendly or dwarf variety, something a little bit smaller. Bigger pots mean less watering because they dry out a lot slower. But those black ones get really hot, so I don't recommend those, but you can use them. A lot of people want to plant tomato plants, so I show this a lot. If you want tomatoes throughout the growing season, you want them in your salad, you want to give some to your neighbors occasionally, you're going to want to pick an indeterminate tomato. Okay, look at this calendar. Month after month, you get tomatoes. And look how tall it gets. It can get 10 feet or more. I've heard of even 20 feet. Bush tomatoes or determinate are smaller. They're going to be your container friendly. But look, you're only going to get fruit all within 1 month. Okay, so it mass produces, but you're not going to get your tomatoes throughout the growing season. It's a one and done plant. So think about this. When you go shopping for your tomatoes, look it up. You can say Sweet 100, is it indeterminate or determinate? Just Google it and it'll come up, it'll pop up. A lot of times, most of the time, the plant label or your seed packet will tell you, and I'll show you some examples. Now, also look over here on the left, these indeterminate tomatoes, you want to prune those. Let me go to the next slide. This is the same information, but more of a list. So back to the indeterminate, okay? These are the taller vining ones. You want to prune these because that root system is doing all it can. The leaves on top are creating, doing photosynthesis, okay? Sending sugar into the plant, food into the plant. You want to prune off anything that's not producing for you or that's taking energy away from that plant. So any suckers, basically you've got the stem, you know, and a couple little stems sticking out. If you see that little crotch and a little suckers growing, pinch those off on indeterminate tomatoes because you want all the energy going into producing fruit. You also want to trim some of the bottom leaves off because those are not producing for you. Don't trim off all the leaves because remember, your plant needs to feed itself too. The determinate bush or smaller patio type tomatoes, you don't need to prune those because they, like I said, they're a one and done. Just let it do its thing. Look at the determinate tomato versus the indeterminate. So it doesn't mean, you know, when you have this indeterminate, oh, I only have 6 tomatoes on my plant, something must be wrong. No, that plant just doesn't produce a whole lot at once. It's going to give you a little bit over time. Determinate tomatoes, bam, here are all my tomatoes, enjoy. 1 to 3 weeks, they all ripen. And then after that, the plant just starts to degrade a little bit. It starts to dwindle in health. It's done. It gave you all that it could and it's done. I like these indeterminate tomatoes because, you know, you get your tomatoes throughout the season. If you're wanting to can or make marinara and you need a lot of tomatoes at once, determinate is the way to go because you're going to get a bunch at once. So here's how you find out if it's determinate or indeterminate. On this plant tag, it says right here, determinate. On this seed packet, indeterminate. On this seed packet, determinate. So they will tell you 95% of the time they are labeled. Sometimes you'll need to Google the information. If you have a smartphone, take it with you and type it in. Such and such tomato, indeterminate or determinate. You'll get that information. Fertilizing tomatoes. When you plant them, go ahead and fertilize them, but only at half strength. I have found that fertilizing tomatoes too much can sometimes be counterproductive because all the nutrients go into creating those big leaves. Remember I talked about tomato trees? Do you grow tomatoes to look at the leaves? No, you want fruit. So when you plant your tomato deeply too. It'll be stronger, it'll grow more roots out of those nodes. Give it half strength fertilizer when you plant it. Then wait to fertilize it after you see the first fruits. Don't fertilize it before that because all that energy, all that nutrition will go to those leaves instead of your fruit. So wait. Make sure you use tomato-specific fertilizers. If you use regular Miracle-Gro on your tomatoes, too much nitrogen, you're going to end up with those tomato trees and absolutely no fruit. I think every beginner gardener has done that at some point in their life. They're thinking, oh, let me put this on, it'll grow bigger. It doesn't work that way. This website, Texas A&M AgriLife Extension website, so much good information. If you haven't visited, I highly suggest it. And this is where you get your shopping list. This is where Texas A&M has gone through the trouble of planting different vegetables and analyzing and recording information and putting it on the approved list for our area. You guys know that we shouldn't pick vegetables based on what grows well in Kentucky or what did well at your aunt's house in Alaska. Different climate, it doesn't work that way. We need to choose what works best here, our drought, our weather conditions, our heat. So go to the internet, Google, Yahoo, whatever you like, and search AgriLife Extension, and it'll take you straight to that website. This is what I got off that website. It's all free information. Let's say you have a vegetable garden. I have a lot of students who don't have full sun. They're like, what can I grow? Can I have a veggie garden or herb garden? Yes, you can. Look at this. These down here tolerate part shade. Okay, of course you need a little bit of sun, but you don't need full sun. These will do well. Whereas the ones on top require bright sunlight. Maturity rates. Let's say you're going to go on a cruise in 2-3 months. You want quick to mature plants. You want to harvest quickly. So you might want to choose this category up here. Okay, radishes, you can grow in 30 days from seed to radish. Moderate or slow. These will just take a little bit longer for you to reap the benefit. Same information. If you want to go straight to it, just Google or go to the internet and type in vegetable variety selector. You will choose this region, region B. It's not difficult. There's a map too. We are North and Central Texas. So when you go shopping, print this up. I think it's 3 or 4 pages. You can also print it just by cucumbers or just by tomatoes if that's all you want to buy. But I like to print all 3 or 4 pages up and just have it handy just in case. So for instance, this year, I plan on making pickles. I love homemade pickles. So instead of just blindly going to Home Depot, Lowe's, Callaway's, or, mom and pop, I am going to select something from here. I ended up finding Sumter pickling cucumbers. So that is what I'm going to plant. It's on the approved shopping list. So if you go with these varieties, you're going to have more success. They've been tested. Texas A&M said, this is what's good for your region. These vegetable calendars are awesome, and Nancy is so nice. She's working behind the scenes here to bring this to you guys. She is going to email you a video of this class and also these veggie calendars. And yes, Collin County, I am using your vegetable calendar. I love it. We're in the same zone. So it all works for us. Look how busy February was. You can plant so many things in February, also in March, look, but you better get those planted. Over here, Marshall Grain also has another good calendar. They'll talk about harvest days, approximate harvest days, when to plant it, how deep. I really like this AgriLife Extension Collin County one because it's just quick to look at. You can just go right down that month and know, oh, I can plant this now, I can plant this. But both are great. Companion planting charts. You need to sketch out your vegetable garden and figure out, where do I want to put the cucumbers? Where do I want to put the corn? Where do I want to put the tomatoes? You need to know, are those two plants friends or are they foes? Because some plants actually hate each other, okay? Anything with a red dot represents, do not plant these two together. Beans and chives, don't ever plant those together. But cauliflower and beans, that's an okay. Those actually do very well together. So find out if the two plants you're about to plant, if they should be planted together or if you need to space them apart. Look at some more examples. Tomatoes love basil. Beans don't like garlic and onions. Dill likes cauliflower, but hates carrots. Does this sound like your last family reunion? Who knew that your veggie garden could be filled with so much drama? But seriously, you need to know what needs to be planted together, what doesn't. If you plant the wrong ones together, the plant could die. You could have stunted growth. You could have no produce form. It stresses out the plant. So there's something in there, where they don't agree. So this chart will also be emailed to you. When you are thinking about designing your veggie garden, make sure you have complete accessibility on all sides. It's just easier to be able to reach over and pick your lettuce or your tomatoes if you don't have to trample on your produce. Here are some more raised bed ideas. The one on the left is great if you have rabbits that are ravaging your garden. There's some chicken wiring there that you may not be able to see. For large vegetable gardens, I like to use those stepping stones. That way you're guided, you know where to step so you don't cause compaction. You'll always know to step just in that pathway. Mulch, everybody knows this. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but it does protect your roots. Keeps more moisture in, 2 to 3 inches is recommended. I want to set you guys up for success. And a big mistake that I made in the past, and that's why I'm telling you this, I created a raised flower bed with my husband, a veggie bed, and got really excited. It's about 1.5 feet tall. I put it out. We did not realize in our excitement that we put it right on top of sprinklers. So we ended up having to dig underneath it because it was already, we filled it and everything. So be sure to do your analysis first before you start digging or anything like that. Call 811. Ever since then, I always call 811 and I have them come out and tell me, are there wires underneath? Anything dangerous? It's free. They come out. Every time I call, they're out in 1 to 3 days. Very, very fast. But do that first when you're planning. And also find out where your sprinkler system lines are. I'd hate for you to spend a lot of money making those repairs. Raised bed soil. I talked about this a little earlier, and I gave you some vendors to purchase from. But when you call, before you go out there, say, do you have vegetable gardening soil? And they'll tell you. pH between 6 to 7 is best. Now you guys understand the soil pH. It should be full of beneficial bacteria, good compost. Worms are great. Anytime I find a worm out in the yard, I'll throw it in my veggie bed or my compost because I want it to reproduce and just be happy. I love worm compost. I love all compost. If you don't know how much soil to purchase, go to soilcalculator.com. You can type in round vegetable bed or rectangular. It's very specific. How tall is it? How wide is it? And they'll tell you exactly how many bags or how much bulk, how many cubic yards to purchase. And of course, make sure you put that in your budget. Watering your vegetable gardens, your seeds, you are going to need to water those every day. If a seed starts to sprout or germinate and it dries out, it doesn't have enough roots. And so it'll just shrivel up and die and it cannot come back. It's one and done. After your plant starts growing, go ahead and taper off over time. Drip irrigation is best. My setup is very similar to this. You don't want, especially with plants like tomatoes, you don't want to water from overhead because they are susceptible to blight. And having wet leaves is not a good mix for them. So drip irrigation is best. It also helps prevent runoff and saves you money because you get that deep soak that roots like. Seedlings, they need a little more attention from wind, from sun. Maybe we're going to have a late freeze. Goodness, I hope not. But you know, March 18-ish, it could be March 14, March 21. If you go to almanac.com, you can find out by zip code. It's very specific when your last average frost date is, if you want to be super specific. But, you know, that's just the average last frost date. You can still get a freeze beyond that. So be prepared with your frost cover sheet or whatever you have to protect them. You need to acclimate them to the sun. Vining plants. When you sketch out your garden, where you're going to plant what? If you're going to plant vining plants like cucumbers, even a indeterminate tomato, okay, those can shade out your smaller plants. And if those smaller plants need a lot of sun, forget about it. You're not going to get a good yield from them because they're not getting sun. Soil is extremely important, but so is sunlight. Here are some more ideas for those vining crops. We know this is pretty basic, but I have seen even master gardeners make this mistake. They don't have a plan. So they'll just go out and start planting stuff, hoping it'll grow. And then they're shading out some of the smaller plants. So you need to make sure the larger plants are in the back and medium in the middle, short in the front, so that all three layers are getting sunlight. Also, your thirsty veggie plants should be grouped together, and then your not so needy or thirsty plants should be planted together, because how are you going to water them if they've got all different kinds of watering needs? So make sure you classify them that way. Tomatoes, a lot of people have seen this, blossom end rot. And you know, when you're a gardener, you kind of have to be a plant detective. You need to go outside. I tell my students, go outside and look at your plants every day. At least every other day, once a week. Go out there, because if you've got an insect or a fungal disease or anything else, you can nip it in the bud quickly if you find it quickly. In this situation, it could be not enough calcium in the soil. That's why you need to go get your soil tested. One thing that a lot of gardeners do is they'll crush up a calcium pill before they plant a tomato plant. Compost is great. I put all my eggshells in my compost, so I get a lot of calcium for free. Insects on the left there, we all know we hate those aphids. Aphids like to come and suck on your plants. They take the life out of them, stress out your plants. I like to just use the strong hose to rinse those off. If it's a huge infestation, you might want to cut off some leaves that are heavily infested to start off. Smush them with your fingers, do the water hose trick. If worse comes to worse, neem oil, that'll help get rid of these, but only apply that in the early morning or evening, because neem oil, you know, oil-based, can burn. It can scorch your plants in the sunlight. On the right-hand side, a lot of people see this too. It's a tomato that's been sucked on by stink bugs. They cause that damage and make you not want to eat them. So that's going to be stink bug damage. You can pull those off, vacuum them off. I just like to use my hands or the vacuum. I have a vacuum dedicated to my organic gardening. So you can just suck them all up. If worse comes to worse, you can use other methods. Diatomaceous earth is a little more gentle than the store-bought, the more toxic chemicals. Neem oil. Failure to set fruit. A lot of people have this problem. You're going along great. You've got your healthy plants, or you thought. Let's look at these pictures first. There's a tomato plant, no tomatoes at all, just a plant. In the middle, this is a cucumber, but the baby is turning, that's a little bitty, let's say half-inch baby. It's got a blossom at the end, and it's turning yellow and about to fall off. It's weak. And then over here on the right, you've got some squash, okay? That is turning pale and it's about to fall off because the plant's not going to keep it anymore. Why does that happen? It could be improper temperature, okay? Tomatoes, peppers, a lot of veggies, they don't want to produce when it gets too hot. So what I tell people is don't struggle during the heat of summer. When it's 100+ degrees, you may want to just say, you know what? I'm going to take it easy. I'm going to go ahead and trim my plants down to the ground or pull them up. They've done their deed. I've received all I can from them, because you're basically going to keep them watered just to keep them alive and hoping that they'll produce for you again in the fall. But they might be too stressed out during that time. And you're kind of wasting water, just watering them all the time just to keep them alive, because the plant is saying, I'm in fight or flight mode. So what happens is you may have a little flower growing and you're thinking, ooh, I'm going to have a cucumber. And then suddenly it drops it because it's saying, I've got to protect myself. I cannot support fruit too. So it just drops it. It's very upsetting to see. I have seen that a lot in cucumbers. Blossom drop. It could also be too much nitrogen. So remember I told you have to be a plant detective. What did you do last week? Did you fertilize it? The weather's really nice. Well, it might be because you used too much nitrogen. Or let's say you didn't fertilize, but it's now reaching over 100 degrees every day. It might be because it's just too hot. Another big issue, lack of pollination. Your plants will drop, okay, if it hasn't been fertilized. So tomatoes, okay, tomatoes have a bisexual, or it's also called, a lot of names for it, a perfect flower. So in a tomato flower, you've got male and female inside one little flower. So if you grab the stem and gently shake it, you're fertilizing. So you're allowing more fruit to be made. Or if a heavy wind comes through, same thing. But I like to just put my hand on the stem, the main stem, and just gently shake it to help it out. If you have a plant like cucumber or zucchini in those families, they have separate male and female flowers. So a bee or pollinator, or even an ant, or your paintbrush, your Q-tip, has to touch that male flower and take it to the female so that a fruit can be made. If you don't do that, or if you don't have enough pollinators, you're not going to get your fruit. You will get a little cucumber baby or a little squash baby form, but when you see that everything's going well and all of a sudden it shrivels up and falls off, it's likely because it was not pollinated. So be sure to interplant some bee loving plants that bee loves. I like to plant anise hyssop in my veggie garden. It brings bees like crazy. I have a friend that owns a bee farm and he loves planting anise hyssop because the bees love it. And quit using the bee killing chemicals. Bees are your friend. Closing notes. Plant what you love. Don't plant what you think your neighbor's going to want. Plant what you like, because you're more likely to tend to that garden to reap the benefit because you enjoy the cucumbers or you enjoy the tomatoes. Plant varieties that do well in North Texas. I get excited sometimes. I go to Callaway's, I can't remember what it's called, but all these different stores, and I'll be like, oh, look at this tomato plant. Oh, look at this. And then I'm like, wait a minute. I'm going to stick to this list because I know those are proven for our area. You can probably do okay with one that's not on the list, but why waste your money and risk it when somebody has already done the research for you? So be sure to take your shopping list. A vegetable garden takes work, you guys. You can't just plant it and forget it. You've got to prune it. You've got to water it. You've got to fertilize it. Research. I'm going to give you those calendars, when to plant. Compost is your friend. Not all insects are bad. I just taught a class on this today, how to be more environmentally friendly and using less toxic methods to get rid of pests in the yard. You know, if you see a leaf has been chewed on, look at it this way. You helped feed nature. A bird ended up eating that caterpillar that ate that leaf because you provided a food source to it. So don't look at it as, oh, you know, bugs are chewing on my plants, they're doing all this. I know it can get out of hand for sometimes, and you don't want to plant a veggie garden just to see it demolished by bugs, but a little bit is okay. That's natural. Only 5% of bugs are bad. 95% help you. They actually help you. They help keep down the bad bug population. They help pollinate. So we need to protect those guys. Read this, please. A poor gardener grows weeds. A good gardener grows plants. A great gardener grows soil. That's what I try to do. I try to grow good soil. I try to learn my plants. If there is a new vegetable that I want to plant, or any plant for that matter, I will get online and do research and say, what does that, you know, I'll say like XYZ plant soil pH, and it'll pull it up. Oh, okay. Well, that's not going to do great in my yard, and I don't want to tend to its specific needs all the time and have to fertilize that one specifically. So I'll just back off and not buy that variety. So do your research before you go out there and waste your money, because you don't want to spend your weekends tending to things when you can just sit back and enjoy and see healthy growth. This is the TCMGA website, the email address and phone number. If you guys ever want to give us a call, somebody like me, another master gardener, will answer your call and answer any questions you might have. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Loretta. Great presentation.
Thank you.
What do you think about adding vermiculite?
You can, you know, we use that sometimes for propagation. I haven't ever put it into my outdoor soil. I have used it for potting soil. So I don't have any experience with it in my native ground soil, but I have used it for propagation.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
For those that are on a septic system, how close or far can you have your vegetable garden to like a lateral line?
You know, you are going to have to get with the person who installed that. We have a rental home out in Stephenville that has one, and they will give you a map of where all those lines are. So it's hard for me to say, but we know where those lines are, kind of like a sprinkler system. You kind of need to know where those lines are before you start digging. So I would check with them.
So I know where they are. What I'm trying to get at is for the leaching area.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how much distance do we need to allow for keeping the lateral line so many feet away from, or keep your garden so many feet away from that leaching area?
I don't know that. I don't know what's safe on that. I would definitely check with the company that put it in. They should definitely have that information for you. Are there any other master gardeners here that might have that information from previous experience?
No, I do agree with you, Loretta, that he should check with the septic company to ask for the recommendation for safety.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
But great question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to grow tomatoes and peppers from seeds, and they're getting long and tall and lanky. So I've started putting them on the porch so that they can get sun, because the temperatures are not as cold as that was. I'm wondering when I go ahead and plant them in the garden, and when do I fertilize them?
Okay, well, with tomatoes, you want to make sure you see some fruit. I would wait until they're about an inch. I'm trying to get to a page to share some information with you. I would definitely wait until you see some flower buds before you fertilize again, because like I said earlier, you don't want that energy going towards leaf production or to make those leaves bigger and stronger. You're not planting that plant for the leaves, you're planting it for the vegetables. So wait until you see the blooms, and on tomatoes, some little babies before you fertilize again. Did you have another question on that?
No, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Any other questions? I think I lost a slide. I wanted to talk to you guys about something else. What I was going to tell you about was when you go out and, you know, should I buy that plant or should I start from seed? Get that question a lot. If you are planting something like radishes, you know, you will get a radish in 30 days if you plant that seed. And honestly, I've never been to a store and saw a radish for sale. I mean, who would want to buy just one radish, right, in a little container? Also, if you go out and buy a tomato plant, you're going to probably get about 100, let's say 50, 100, maybe 200 tomatoes out of that tomato during the life of it. Whereas if you wanted to grow a cabbage or a lettuce, when you go out and buy that little plant, it's just one plant. So if you're spending $3.50 for a little cabbage that you're going to grow at home, you have to spend the time, maybe fertilize it, water it, tend to it, baby it, when you could have just gone to the store and bought a head of cabbage for $3, right? So you kind of have to analyze and figure out what's going to be, you know, what's going to make more sense financially and not take up so much of your time. Does that make sense? So starting from seeds is great, but it's also time consuming. You were talking about, I just remembered your question was that your tomatoes are too leggy, too lanky. They're reaching for sunlight. You're not giving them enough sunlight. They need to be preferably in a sunny south-facing window, but even that sometimes is not enough. If you live in the city and there's a home right next to you, you're going to have too much shade or maybe a tree. So I recommend if you start your veggies by seed, have a good grow light. They start $20 and up. Even the cheap ones work pretty well. You can buy them on Amazon, Home Depot, pretty much anywhere online. If you want to get really fancy, you can even go and get some heating mats to speed up your germination. But think about all those variables. You know, you've got to take care of it. You've got to water that seedling, watch it grow, make sure nothing bad is going on. Dampening can happen where fungal issues, bacteria make that plant die. You know, nothing will happen. You may not even have anything germinate because of that, the fungi. So it does take work to plant from seed. I tell brand new gardeners who are just now starting to garden, the first year, just go out and buy that plant. And also, when you have a packet of tomato seeds, you could have 50, 100 seeds in there. Do you need 100 tomato plants? Probably not. So just go out. If you're a newbie and you need to gain some experience, just go to the store and buy a plant that's been grown, a little baby plant, bring it home and plant it. Just make sure you acclimate it to the sun. You don't want to just get it from the store. It's probably been in some shade for the consumer. It might be inside the store even. So make sure you take it outside and expose it to the sun for maybe 5 minutes the first day, bring it in. The next day, maybe 30 minutes and so on. So gently acclimate it to the outside environment. Any other questions?
Loretta, I'm not sure. There was a question from Mark Jones about style of raised beds. Mark, you want to unmute and talk about your, I'm not sure if I know how to pronounce that correctly. Mark, are you still logged on? He was asking if you have ever considered using, is it pronounced hugelkultur? I think it's using wood and things as the base. Have you heard of that before, where they use a raised bed and they use wood debris underneath for it to break down? Are you familiar with that, Loretta?
Yes, I've heard of people putting like wood chips underneath and letting it slowly degrade and become compost. That's fine as a filler, but you definitely don't want to mix that with your soil, because if you have a lot of chunky wood chips in the soil, it will actually pull nitrogen and take it away from your plants. So you can end up with nitrogen deficiencies. So mulch on top of the soil is okay, but mixed into the soil is not okay. You need to wait for that wood to completely degrade or compost before adding it. Now, a lot of people are doing that. They're doing the raised beds and doing, you know, a bunch of pine bark or whatnot on the very bottom. And over time, that does become compost.
Loretta, there was a question about somebody asked if it's too late to plant lettuce.
Lettuce does like cooler temperatures. I would say no. Go ahead and plant it. Yep, you still have time. It just doesn't like super hot weather.
And I noticed we have some that have raised your hands. If you raised your hand and have a question, please just unmute and ask Loretta your question.
Don't be shy. Someone else might have the same question.
There's a question about if you have fire ants in your vegetable bed, what do you use?
I don't like to use chemicals, as I said earlier, but there is a time and a place. Some people use orange oil. I personally use diatomaceous earth. It looks like flour and it is non-toxic. The only drawback of it, well, first of all, you don't want to breathe it in. Second of all, if there's rain in the forecast, it'll wash it away. But I sprinkle that around my compost bin and around my veggie gardens. It will kill ants. It will kill pretty much anything with an exoskeleton. What it does is it scratches, it's like glass for them. It scratches them up and dehydrates that insect. So it's, you know, but it's going to kill all exoskeletons. Anything that crawls over it will be killed. But I use that around my compost bin and around my veggie garden. Diatomaceous earth. DE for short.
Okay. Any more questions for her? Oh, here's one. How to control pill bugs in the raised bed. DE, I guess, huh?
I've seen those. DE would do the same thing because they have that exoskeleton shell. Yeah, those can be a nuisance. They can start gnawing on your roots and such. So I would use DE.
Okay.
Hi, Loretta.
Hi.
Susan Blakey here. We just moved to a new property, and we're starting off. I will be doing new raised beds for a garden. So totally, this was a pasture before with cows running on it before we moved in. So my question is this: when I do my raised beds, I was going to do the cardboard on the bottom, and then put my compost and stuff in, but should I mix that with some of the native soil, or should I just bring in good black dirt and my compost and whatever and just fill my beds up that way for a veggie garden?
How big is your veggie garden?
Well, I probably will have probably 8 or 10 raised beds.
Oh, wow, quite a bit.
Yeah.
You might want
We
to
have 47 acres.
Oh, wow. Lucky you. That's a lot of work though. But yeah. What I would do, because soil, I'm not going to lie, it's very expensive. That's going to be a lot of money to fill those up. So what I would do personally is if you've got extra soil, go ahead and fill maybe half of your raised beds with it and then top it off with that good soil. I would definitely go out and buy some good soil if you can. Now, if you're wanting to make a lot of veggie beds, it may be a little more cost effective just to amend your native soil if you want to do it that way. But of course, having raised beds is primo because you get to put really good soil in there. Good soil, better product, better plants, healthier plants, better output. But that's up to you and your budget. But yeah, I have done that with some potted plants that I have in the backyard. I will just get some cheap topsoil or any soil that I have in the backyard, and I'll fill half the pot. And then the top will have good, nutritious, fertile soil.
Okay. Whenever we had raised bed gardens at our other house, and I started off from scratch, and I put all compost and whatever in it. But they did not do very well for a couple of years. And I think it's because there wasn't enough nitrogen or there wasn't enough nutrients. It was in just the compost itself. So I was just wondering if there's something else to add.
Okay, pure compost.
It was, yes.
Okay, that's going to be too much. Compost is nutrient dense, lots of nutrition. So you want to mix that with some other soil.
With the soil, okay.
Yeah, use compost as an amendment, not as your only soil. Yeah, it has to be mixed. So it might have burnt your plants.
Okay. Yeah, okay. All right, thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome.
We have a lot of Collin County Master Gardeners on this tonight.
I know, I saw that. I was like, look at that, all the Collin County people.
Yay.
Awesome. I love your veggie calendar.
Yes.
Happy to have y'all.
Hi,
Yeah.
Loretta. I have a question. Do you have a prevention for squash bugs? And the second part of that is, what is the solution if they do come into your garden? And I specifically have a raised bed.
Yeah, those are definitely a nemesis. A lot of people hate those. You can use the gentler, more organic methods, neem oil. You can use diatomaceous earth because they have an exoskeleton. You can use those two methods. Did I already say neem oil? You can use those methods. And of course, hand picking. That's what I do. I personally, you can do what you want. Some people like the chemicals that you buy at the store. I used to use those when I was younger, but I don't anymore. I just like to, first of all, it's really important to become a plant detective. Go outside, and if you just see one or two, you can nip it in the bud quickly by removing them and not having an issue. But if you go out there a week later and you have an infestation, that's when you have to resort to using chemicals. You can also use an insecticidal soap, but those are kind of difficult to get rid of. So you may have to do, a weekly treatment just to make sure you're getting them. But I would pick off as many as you can, but they are a nuisance. But, some people will use harsh chemicals. I won't name those. I just don't want to eat vegetables that I've had to do that on. So I would use those options.
Appreciate it.
Yes, you're welcome. Any other questions?
Any more questions? Okay, I guess you covered it all. Everyone, please remember that there is an evaluation link in the chat. So if you would, please click and fill that out before you leave. Like I said, Nancy will also send you a copy of that link, so you can fill it out later if you wish to do so. You had a great attendance. Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you, everybody.